STEM City USA Healthy Doses series is your passport to a balanced lifestyle. Hosted by Dr. Tiffany Anderson and presented in the Boston Scientific Auditorium. And now, Dr. Tiffany Anderson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Healthy Doses with Dr. Tiffany Anderson, brought to you by Boston Scientific and live on STEM City USA. My name is Rayonda Kennedy, and I will be your moderator for today. If you've been paying attention the past couple of years, you've noticed that mental health has really become a popular topic of discussion. And if you really pay attention to current events and things that's been happening in the world, you realize that mental health should be a popular conversation. It's something that's really important. That's why our team here at STEM City USA really came together to put this show together to provide a forum of discussion, to provide resources and tips. And that's also why we brought in expert Dr. Tiffany Anderson to kind of come and guide these conversations. Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ray. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So, Tiff, Dr. Anderson, why don't we go ahead and just introduce yourself and just let the audience know who you are, where you come from, and just kind of talk about your background a little bit.
All right. First of all, good morning, everyone. I know it is a little early depending on where you are on a Saturday, so thank you all for joining us and just kind of spending some time with us as we learn more about mental health and just the importance of it, right? So yes, my name is Dr. Tiffany Anderson. I am born and raised from California. My background is I have a master's in marriage and family therapy and a PhD in counselor education and supervision. I am the owner and CEO of Crown Therapy LLC, where I work with individuals, families, and couples in the Black community. I really am here and in this profession to be the change that I wanted to see. I wanted to be the person that I did not have growing up, the person that I can go to, that I can talk to, where there wasn't necessarily bias, because family and friends, there are bias, right? And so I wanted to be that person that someone can come to without the fear of being judged, without the fear of being shamed for just who they are or certain decisions and behaviors. And so hence becoming a therapist, but also allowing my gifts and spirituality to lead me in the therapy room and recognize that a lot of what I do cannot necessarily be taught in a book. There has to be an inner knowing and an inner understanding of who I am and how I can utilize my own life experiences and help other folks. And so ultimately, that is what I'm doing. That is what I love. And that is truly my passion.
That's great, Tiff. Today's topic, we thought it would be really important for this show that's talking about mental health to really discuss what is mental health. Like I said, it's been a popular conversation, but there's still a lot of stigmas and a lot of preconceived thoughts about therapy. And so one of the things that I want to do is really have this show kind of define and talk about those stigmas and really try to demystify therapy and kind of open it up for a possibility. And so we're going to jump into that conversation, Tiffany, right after this message.
Hi. Just really excited to get my hands dirty and just get to work on the digital health platform.
To gain some more hands-on experience in the areas of accounting and finance.
Learn a bunch of new information that I probably was not exposed to previously.
I need to work on real-life projects and to apply the skills that I've learned in my degree.
Medical devices has always been a dream of mine.
Learning about SAP, forecasting, and just supply chain as a whole.
Really excited to actually be able to deal with actual people who are being impacted by the company and the products.
Connecting with people from all over the country and all over the world.
Learn, adapt, and apply something to Boston Scientific.
Just being part of
the BSC's inclusive culture.
See how my engineering degree can be put to use in the industry.
Just getting as much experience within quality systems as possible.
Having a lot of fun and helping out people at the same time.
Expanding my network and seeing how my coursework is applied to the real world.
Learn more about the different roles. So there's manufacturing, there's quality, there's R&D, there's people that work in the lab, and all of them are in this building.
It's a great opportunity for me to learn and grow as an engineer.
And I know it's going to be a fantastic summer.
If you're just joining us, welcome. Welcome to STEM City USA. This is Healthy Doses with Dr. Tiffany Anderson. And today's discussion is really talking about mental health and demystifying the therapy process and then therapy in general. If you have any questions, I want to let you know that what you can do in the top corner, you should see a QR code. So if you take your phone and you scan that code, you'll get a Slido where you can put your questions in, and when we get to the Q&A portion of the show, you'll be able to we may be able to answer some of your questions. So as the show goes on, if you have any questions, just remember to scan that code at the top. Dr. Anderson, let's start off this session by defining mental health. What is mental health? You know, what should people be thinking about when you say the word mental health?
The thing about mental health, and what we're going to find out throughout the series, is that it varies, right? So I want that to, first of all, come across that there's not necessarily a definitive kind of shared idea of mental health, right? Like there's an understanding, there's I think a generalized idea, and that's what I'm going to give you today. But I just want to be clear with the audience that it's okay if it looks differently, right? It's okay that what I talk about may not align perfectly about what you think about mental health. But a generalized understanding of mental health is recognizing that one's mental health generally encompasses your emotional, psychological, spiritual, and even social well-being, right? So it influences the way you think, the way you perceive the world, your behaviors, and oftentimes it, can determine how you interact with stress in interpersonal relationships, right? And even in your decision making.
So what you just described, what should we aim for? What does good mental health look like? Or maybe what does bad mental health look like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because it's extremely common, right? As a society, we're oftentimes seeking what normal and abnormal looks like, right? Or good or bad. What we're finding is that it varies. Yeah, there's no one way of doing anything or of being, kind of mentally good or mentally bad, right? So I wouldn't say there's this kind of one or the other. What I would say is that positive mental health is really important if we want to kind of stabilize our moods and have constructive behavior and emotions and thoughts, right? When we focus on mental health, we increase productivity, we enhance our own self-acceptance and self-esteem, and we improve our relationships, right? So if we think of positive mental health, it's really one that's consistently seeking overall well-being. So that's positive. When we think of bad, or I would say unhealthy. Mm-hmm. Unhealthy, I would say.
I think that's a good word.
Better word, right?
Yeah.
Unhealthy. It varies, and it doesn't even have to be extreme. I want to throw that out there. It doesn't have to be an extreme. It just means whatever feels off for you, right? So severe could look like not being able to get out of bed once a week, that can still be considered severe for a person that's usually up and effervescent and, and moving. And does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so it could still be considered unhealthy. It doesn't have to be extreme or severe. And so that's why it changes from person to person, because only they can really tell you what that looks like. But unhealthy really means when we're unable to stabilize our moods. Yeah. When we feel like we're not in control of how we're behaving, how we're responding to conflict, either with others or inside of ourselves. It could look like how we're treating ourselves, how we're taking care of ourselves. If our self-care just completely like decreases, right? That can be considered unhealthy mental health.
So basically what you're saying is it's a spectrum. Like there's no right or wrong answers. And ultimately it comes down to what you're feeling and what you're going. So if I'm feeling down, or just feeling off, when do I know it's time to seek out therapy? When do I know that I should probably start seeking help, or, this might just be, I'm having a bad day. People have bad days.
Absolutely.
So what does that line look like? When do I know it's time I need to call Dr. Anderson?
I like how you said that we deserve a bad day. We do. We all are deserving of sad days, of mental health days, right? Where we call out just when we're not feeling it, right? So I want to normalize that first, that we are deserving of days where we just don't want to do. Yeah. And we live in a society where we're constantly doing. Yeah. And that's the expectation, not even if we want to, right? That is the expectation and the speed of the society in which we live. And so it's okay to not feel like yourself, especially when the world around you doesn't necessarily feel safe, right? And it's okay to feel off and fearful of what's happening around you. So I want to say that first, because that doesn't necessarily mean you must go seek help. It can just be a moment. I think when that moment turns into several moments where where you feel like you can't get yourself out of this funk, where you feel as if the tools that you once used are no longer working. When you feel as if you don't feel yourself.
Right.
You don't feel yourself. And so those are subjective experiences because they change from person to person. But I think one of the big things is, when life changes and you have an experience and, you're going through those emotions and you're just like, this feels different. I don't know what to do in this moment, or I don't have the necessary tools to get myself out in this moment. That is one of the telltale signs where you may need additional support.
So let me just recap and kind of summarize what we just said here. So mental health is a spectrum, right? There's no right, there's no wrong, there's positive, there's negative, but ultimately mental health is subjective to the individual. And so when it's time to seek, it's really up to the individual when they're like, I can't do this on my own, or it's like the walls are kind of coming down, or, it's prolonged, and that's the time where, we pick up the phone, or, we go and call a therapist, or call Dr. Anderson. And that's just kind of just dependent on the mood. Now, I'm stubborn, Doc. And
I believe it.
And so, I might, have a couple of days, but I'm gonna be like, I got this, I got it.
Yeah.
When is the time for somebody to be like, Ray, you need to go, you need to call somebody, you need to go get some therapy, because you come at me like that, I'll be like, no, you need to go get some therapy. There's gonna be some retaliation.
Right.
Like, when you're talking about loved ones or family members, when is it time to step in? Because there's going to be some backlash, and you may be overstepping, but like you just said, it's kind of up to that individual. But sometimes people can't help themselves or need help to kind of go in the right direction, if I worded that right correctly. But when is it time to step over that line and really just kind of push or suggest a loved one or an individual to kind of go and seek that?
Yeah. It's difficult. It's difficult. Can I share a personal story, Ray?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So, in 2020, my grandmother passed, 89, beautiful life, but she passed. And she was my person, right? She was really my person. And so it got to a point in my grief that it felt odd, right? I had never grieved in this way, but I was talking to one of my best friends who was asking, how am I doing? And I was honest with her, like, I'm not getting out of bed, or it's really hard for me to get up in the morning, to get out of bed, to really get out of this funk, right? And I remember her saying, I think you need to see someone. I think you need to speak to someone. And I was like, you, Ray. I was like, I got this. I know what I'm doing, And she was the one that pushed me. But the push, and this goes to your question, we can't force anyone to do what they don't want to do, right? We can only suggest. We can strongly suggest, but we cannot force them. So it has to be a personal decision for themselves. I think the way it's delivered is helpful. Although, folks like me too could become a bit defensive, but it was important for me to know that the person that was suggesting therapy had my best interests at heart. And I knew she did, and so for her to even suggest it, I knew it was something that I at least needed to think about. And once I really kind of thought about it, it was like, you know what? She's right. She's right. Like I need help. And so I did go to therapy, and that therapist, bless her heart, did help me tremendously where I was able to transition out, get me through my grieving process, and gave me permission to feel the way I felt without judgment, but also pushed me to give that grief a bit more purpose, where she gave me certain homework assignments of how to honor my grandmother and, write out how I'm feeling and all those things. And so, although as a therapist that has the answers, which I don't, I recognized how important it was to seek my own help. And that's why I encourage everyone watching, like, it doesn't matter, how much you think you got it. If there's a part of you that you feel like, I don't have the support in this area, then it is okay. It is okay. And that doesn't mean you have to be in therapy for years and years and years. It doesn't. And I wasn't, because that, it was a part of my life where she helped me to get through that place. And so it was like, okay, well, now we're at a place where more maintenance, where you come like once a month or you transition out, right? But it saved my life. It truly saved my life. And I never thought I would be at necessarily that place where I got so low that I needed to, that I didn't have the tools. As much as I work and do this work, I literally did not have the tools to get myself out of my own hole, right? And so it was like, okay, that is when you need to seek therapy. So that is just a personal example that when the person asking you, if you believe that they are genuine in their request and that they have your best interest, at least consider it.
Well, first of all, Dr. Anderson, thank you for sharing that story with us and really kind of illustrating that for us. But now I'm gonna get a little tricky with you because I'm from the South Side of Chicago. And we talked about me being stubborn, right? Because what you just told me was a really positive experience, right? Somebody you love came to you, suggested it, and you was very open to it. Now, let's just say you talking to me and you go, you should go, and the Chicago come out, and it's like, no, I'm not doing that. I start getting the attitude. What does that look like for the person? Like, do you continue to push, Do you just kind of drop it and kind of let that person come to it on their own? Like, what does that look like? You know, how do you push? Because this is obviously somebody you love, somebody you care for, somebody you want to get help, but they're not, like you said, it's up to the individual. So if they're not open to it, you know, what does that look like for the person? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people who may be watching who might have similar experience or gone through this. So what does that look like? How do you address that?
So been there, done it, know it, right? It has to be that person's own commitment, right? And so, you know, you're asking, you know, if you come, you ask, you plead, you beg, and they're like, stop, I'm fine. That's where it stops. That's where it stops. Not forever, right? But there has to be a place where the let's give them roles, right? So the person, the friend, let's say the friend asking the other person. So there has to be a place where the friend recognizes that they are limited in this space and that they can only suggest, but they cannot force the person to commit. Yeah. I do say this though, if that person is demonstrating certain behaviors that are like unhealthy or detrimental, you can prevent them from doing those behaviors in front of you or around you and create a boundary around that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So where it's like, well, it could be whatever. It could be whatever. But when they're in your presence, you say, okay, that type of behavior is not allowed around me. So if you want to continue to be in this space with me, then you cannot practice those kind of behaviors here. Yeah. And so you can't force them to stop. You can't force them to start therapy, but you can create a boundary around their behavior around you. So then it is continuously reinforced that you have their best interest and you only want the best for them. But their commitment and willingness to improve their mental health is their decision.
Dr. Anderson, thank you for that. And I have one more question before we go to the break. And we're really going to come back and really start going into some of these stigmas and really start demystifying the therapy session. Yeah. But you said something in your story that you shared. You said that your grandmother was your go-to. That was your person. And so when we're talking about mental health and seeking out therapy, do I need to seek out therapy? Or if you have a go-to, if you have, an anchor in your life that you can go to, is that, is it better to go to them or is it better to go to therapy? Or, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I wouldn't say better one way or the other. They give you two different supports. Does that make sense? So one may not be better than the other. It just depends on what the person is in need of, right? So that person, so my grandmother, for instance, at the end of the day, she loved everything about me, right? That's beautiful, but that's also called bias, right? In certain circumstances, I could do no wrong, right? I can do no wrong. So if I had a situation, Granny had my back one way or the other, right? Not saying she wouldn't challenge me, but not to the place of a therapist that's unbiased, right? That doesn't have that kind of connection. And recognizes that I am there for help, right? Not to feel good. And so it depends on what you're seeking. So if you're going to your person for encouragement, for love, for the things that they've always been there for you, that they have always done for you consistently, that is fine. Go to your person. But you can also have your person and a therapist, right? So you can have your person that allows you to know that you are special and that you are meant to be here and that they will always have your back. And then your therapist is there really for you to check in on certain detrimental behaviors or to see if there's different or better ways of doing certain things in your life, right? And so my granny is not my therapist. I didn't go to her for therapy. I could not. You're right. But that wasn't her role in my life. And so I think we have to just understand a person's role and what they can and cannot do. Yeah. So if you are going to your person for therapy or for them to necessarily like provide you the tools and the necessary, information for you to move forward in difficult situations, they may have that, but they may not. So you get to decide if this is something that I need further support with. And you know how you leave that person and you're like, it's not really what I needed. Then you need additional support. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's clear as
day. Yeah, you need additional support.
Yeah.
But only you know. And so I just urge the folks that are, trust your intuition. You know what you need. Even if you don't know exactly what you need, you know you're in need of something, right? And so trust that intuition and go with that. But your person should not be your therapist because they can't. And you don't want to interrupt that beautiful relationship you have with your person by kind of placing and dumping all of your issues and problems and expecting them to fix them, because that is not their job.
Got it. Dr. Anderson, thank you. We're going to take a quick break. You're watching Healthy Doses with Dr. Tiffany Anderson.
Challenges. We all face them, but some people are drawn to them, inspired by them, transformed by them. To those drawn to challenges, there's no time to wait for someone else to solve them. Accepting this path means accepting all of the difficulties that it comes with. The obstacles, the relentless persistence and dedication, carrying patient cases in our minds and in our hearts. We're always pushing forward, working with you to answer these challenges, working as fast and as focused as we can, with the highest standards of quality and support to help you give your patients better care for healthier lives. We know that by listening, learning, and working together, we can overcome any obstacle in our way. The future requires relentless innovation and celebrates those willing to face challenges. When we challenge, we harness strengths, drive ingenuity, and expand potential. When we challenge the possibilities, we improve the health of people around the world. Because when we challenge, we advance. Boston Scientific. Advancing science for life.
And we're back. You're watching Healthy Doses with Dr. Tiffany Anderson, brought to you by Boston Scientific, powered by STEM City USA. Right now, we're in the middle of a great conversation addressing mental health, when to seek help, what is mental health, what does it look like? And now we want to kind of pivot this conversation to really demystifying the therapy. Okay, so you've addressed your mental health, you've gone and you say, I want to seek therapy. So now there's a stigma that we have in society around mental health. But before we jump into that, I just want to give a couple of reminders because I'm starting to see questions coming in. So I still want to encourage, if you're watching, you have any questions, feel free to put it in the comment section of whatever or wherever you're watching it. Or you can scan that QR code, which is right over there in the top right corner of your screen. Just open your camera, scan it, and you'll be taken to a place where you can enter your questions. And when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll be able to answer some of those questions. I also want to remind you that stay tuned after the show because we got a special sneak peek of STEM City Chicago and just give you a real taste of what we're doing with STEM City USA. So, Dr. Anderson, there's a lot of stigmas around seeking therapy. And so my first kind of stigma that I want to address is, oftentimes people think that therapy is for, the most common, diagnosis, the ones that we've all heard of. Is that true? Do you have to be hitting a certain diagnosis or have a certain issue or anything like that to seek out therapy?
Good question. The answer is no. You can go to therapy for any reason. You can go to therapy simply for maintenance. I'm doing well in life and I want to keep it up. I'm going to therapy, right? You may not have to go as often, which is fine and great, right? But there's so many folks that are doing well, but they want to stay on track. They want to continue to utilize their skills, and they recognize that doing well in the moment doesn't mean that things can't change, right? So they want to be on top of it when things do change, because if we know anything about life, it changes. In a moment, life can change, right? And so you don't have to have a major mental health issue to come to therapy. Things can be going well, and you come to therapy. There's couples that, like premarital, they can have a great relationship, but they still want to do premarital counseling because they want to prepare for what marriage will look like moving forward, right? What those changes will look like. And so they're being proactive. So you can absolutely be proactive when it comes to your mental health, and therapy is one of those ways.
So you don't really need a reason to seek out therapy. It could just be like a car, a tune-up, a check-in, just to kind of make sure all systems are going, everything, all the gears are rotating nice and smooth. So that's cool. I want to take a step back because I meant to ask this at the top. What does a therapy session look like? You know, a lot of people, a lot of fear comes from the unknown. So like, I know there's confidentiality, but just in a general sense, what does that look like? And you mentioned something that I also want to throw in with this question is how often, you know, should I be going once a month, once a week, every other day? You know, what does that frequency look like? And what does that session look like?
So again, it changes obviously from session to session, person to person, therapist to therapist. And so oftentimes you're deciding the frequency with the therapist. What I do, when you say, what does a session look like? Well, what I do is first start with a free 15-minute consultation for any potential client. Number one is because I want to encourage them. And I always tell them this, and I think this is important. I want them to know that they have a choice and who they choose to work with. And so that sense of autonomy, that sense of, I don't know if the word is, the word is power coming up for me, but in a healthy way. Does that make sense? But that sense of power, so that they know that they can choose what is best for them. And so I always let them know, you do not at any time have to choose me as a therapist. This is to make sure there is a good fit, to make sure you feel at least as comfortable as possible moving forward. Or I can provide resources and referrals for you to move forward, right, with someone else. So I always tell folks, it doesn't matter to me who you go with as long as you're getting the support you need. That's all I care about. And so I start off by that. And then the session looks differently, right? So in the beginning, you're doing more like, kind of gathering of information, and really asking. So sometimes, oftentimes they're like the first session is the session where you have maybe paperwork or maybe like psychosocial stuff where you're writing out all the information, getting out as much background information as you need, because you don't want to go 4 months in and you recognize that this person may have substance abuse or certain issues that you didn't cover, and you find out and you don't know, right? And so that's why it's important to gather as much information in the beginning. And that's extreme, but we find out that there's just certain information that you may overlook in the beginning, that you need to know, that you find out later. And it's like, oh, well, this explains this behavior, or this explains this behavior, right? And so the beginning is a lot of gathering of the the person's background, their information, family history, like all of those things. And so, but in regards to what that would look like each session, it just depends on what we're working on. It just depends. It just changes. You could be working on anxiety, but the next week they come in and they're like, I have an issue now that has nothing to do with anxiety, right? And so that changes. So you may go to what is imminent in that moment, what's important in that moment. And so that's what it looks like really for me. I allow the client to take the front seat. I always say they are an expert in their lives. I am not an expert in your life. You are the expert. So I allow them to take the front seat and lead. But for me, similar to what you're doing today as a moderator, right? Like that is a lot of what the work that I do, because it's important for folks to know that they do have the power of choice. And a lot of folks that I work with that look like me do not feel like that in society. So it's important for me to reflect that back and let them know that they are the expert in the room. Yeah. That I don't choose for them, they choose for themselves. I just support and provide additional tools and support, and additional tools for them. But ultimately, they get to drive. I'm just in the passenger seat, the music on, and if I need to give directions while we're driving, I do. Hey, make that left, or consider making a left. I mean, we can go the long way and I'm okay with that. Or we can take a shortcut, right? But it's up to them if they turn, keep going right. I'm just there for the ride.
You're the GPS? Is that what you said?
Yeah. That's a good thing. I need to look into that.
So what you just said is you said, I'm the expert. I'm the expert when I come in there.
Yeah, the client is. Yeah.
It's good to know that my psychology degree is coming into.
You're the expert.
So, Dr. Anderson, I know you've heard this stigma. I know you've heard this. So I want you to address this. Mm-hmm. If I go to therapy, now I'm the crazy person. Mm-hmm. What about people who think that, seeking out therapy now kind of defines and makes you, crazy or less than normal, if you will?
Like abnormal or something. Yeah. Right? I hear it all the time. I make reels on IG about a lot of the myths that I hear around therapy, and it's it's unfortunate. It really is, but it's not that it doesn't. There's not necessarily history behind the stigmas of therapy, especially in the Black community, right? So I also want to recognize that, like, there's reasons why folks that look like us do not feel safe in therapy or in certain medical systems, right? So we first must address that. And I think that's why representation is so important. I mean, it's so important. The numbers of calls that I get that are folks are like, I'm looking for a Black female therapist. Again, the power of choice. That makes me very happy. You understand? They don't just accept, I'm looking for a Black male, a Black female. That is who I need to speak with, right? That is who I'm willing to share my lived experiences with, and not feel exploited or guilted or just misunderstood. Mm-hmm. Or just misunderstood. There's so many things that don't have to be explained to me because we share the same culture and many of the same shared experience, right? So you don't have to explain a certain word or certain languages because I get it. We come from similar places. And so representation. A lot of times too, when it's like this idea of being crazy or whatever, I think we just have to recognize that choosing ourselves is most important, not what other people may or may not think. Yeah. So, going to therapy and folks thinking we're crazy, buying that house and folks thinking we shouldn't have, going to school and folks think we're too old. Right? There's always a reason for people to have an opinion about what we're doing. We just have to care more about ourselves than what we care about what people think. So this is.
So, Dr. Adams, I want to stay there because you really touched on something that I really kind of wanted to spin this question off into, and that's going into cultural opinions of therapy. Because like you said, particularly in the African American community and in other communities as well, people are very distrustful for telling other people their business, as well as if I do go, will this person even understand what I'm talking about? Because if you're not from that culture, certain things may seem uncommon or weird when it's really not. It's just how you interact within your community, or just a certain reaction that comes out, and it's not shared with other communities. So I want you to kind of really dig into that a little bit more. And I also want to address the question of, if I am seeking therapy, should I find somebody that looks like me or somebody that comes from similar backgrounds as opposed to someone who hasn't? And if I can't find one, does that mean I don't go? Or should I still try to find somebody? I guess, is it healthy to work with people who may not understand your background?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can work with you can work with therapists that don't look like you. I have friends that work with therapists, with different backgrounds and all those things, and they have no problem. So it's not that you cannot. Are there cultural differences? Yes. Will you spend some time explaining certain things? Yes. Can they still support you in the way that you need? Most likely. Most likely. Is it a different experience for many folks when working with people that look like them? Yes. And there's a lot of research that backs that up, right? So again, it's not that you shouldn't, because if you can find someone, whether they look like you or not, that gives you the support you need, then go for it, But I think it is definitely an intentional decision to go with people or go with a therapist that you may not have to explain certain things, or you may just connect with effortlessly, right? I work with a lot of Black, high achieving, high functioning women. We connect like this, right? Instantly, because we have a lot of the same shared experiences. I have doctors, I have lawyers, I have PhDs, right? So we have experiences that folks will not, right? So when I talk to someone that has gone through the same trauma obtaining a PhD like I did, they can't go to a friend or some, right? It looks differently. And so because there's so few of us in society that has that experience, it may be hard to find it, right? And so when you find it, it's like, she gets it. She gets it. I can really kind of connect with her in that way. And that's just an example. Does that make sense? It's just an example. But it doesn't mean that. No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that one way or the other is going to be a different experience, but it does not mean you cannot get the support that you need.
Dr. Anderson, this has been a great conversation. I have one more question, or I guess one more stigma to address before we go into the Q&A portion. I do want to remind you that if you have any questions, top corner, QR code, scan it, and let us know, do you have any stigmas that are coming to mind that you would like Dr. Anderson to address? But the last one is just talking about the confidentiality. And I know we kind of touched on it a little bit when we was talking about, revealing yourself and kind of telling your business. But can you just talk about the confidentiality and what that means and how protected is the information that I share if I was in a session with you?
Mm-hmm. Great question. And so with confidentiality, there are some exceptions to breaking confidentiality, right? So that is if you are a threat to yourself or someone else, or any issues surrounding child abuse, whether that was recent or in the past, that is a means to inform, right? Because we are mandated reporters. And also any issues surrounding elder abuse, right? But other than that, it stays between the client and the therapist. And so, that's one of the first things I say, obviously, with starting with a client, and it's in my paperwork and all those things. But I also say anything outside of that stays with us, right? And so you can tell me about your wild stories. You can tell me all those things. But if there comes a time, and that means, and I want to be honest and I want to be straightforward. It doesn't mean that you withhold this information, because if there is something we can prevent, or there is something you would like to report, you do have that with your therapist. But outside of that, it stays in the therapy room.
Dr. Anderson, this has been such a great conversation. And I want to take one more break before we bring this show to a close, and before we, kind of get into some of these questions that have come through. So stay tuned, and we'll get to some of your questions in just a minute.
Calling all future STEM pioneers, leaders, and career champions. Join us on every second Saturday of the month for the Baya Career Day. Baya STEM Career Day is all about creating opportunities for students to venture into the world of STEM through the eyes of professionals. You'll meet mentors and presenters that will give you a sneak peek into the many options available to you in the field of STEM. Hosted by teen ambassadors, you'll find yourself among inspiring peers just like yourself that are aiming high for their future. To take part in the Baya STEM Career Day on Zoom, visit fullstemahead.us and register for the next session. Again, that's fullstemahead.us. Baya, becoming everything you are.
All right, Dr. Anderson, this is going to kind of keep you on your toes, because we had quite a few questions come through, and we're going to try to address all of them before we really kind of get to the end of the show. And so the first question that came in is, what are the chances that if I go to treatment, that the treatment will work? If I seek therapy, what are the chances that it will work?
Good question. That all depends on you. Yeah. The therapist can obviously influence those chances, but the work is really with you, and the work that you're actually putting into what you're doing, right? So oftentimes with therapy, there are interventions, there's homework assignments, there's certain tools, there's certain takeaways for each session, right? And so the therapist oftentimes will leave you with a takeaway, and you're supposed to do that or utilize it throughout the week or the 2 weeks or how often you go. And then you return and we talk about those updates, what the changes are, what it may look like kind of moving forward, right? And so the chances really lies within you. Now, if you feel as if your therapist is not supporting you in the way that you need, and that maybe their method is not working, then that's a great way. It may be time to seek other supports or something different. But if you're like, okay, this is going well, I'm feeling as if I'm making the necessary changes. Now that success rate, we don't know the numbers, right? But you get to determine what that looks like in your life and what success looks like for you.
I think that's a great spin into this next question, because you mentioned finding the right therapist that works for you. And so somebody asked, how do I find the right therapist? How do I know it's the right fit?
Mm-hmm. So number one, remember I was talking about those consultations, right? So once you get an idea of the kind of therapist and what they may offer, you want to have, if they provide it, some sort of, I would say, conversation or email exchange or something for you to really know if this is the right person for my issue. But I'm gonna be honest with you, ask the question. Ask, I'm coming for this, and this, and this. Do you cover this? Is this your background? Is this what you practice in therapy? Do you, work with folks with anxiety? Do you work with folks with depression? Are you trauma informed, right? Like, asking the questions and then really kind of I say putting them on the hot seat, like you are interviewing them. And so I always tell folks, seek a therapist the way you look for a car, right? So you definitely want the best. You want the one with all the amenities. You want the one that's in your price range. You want the right, like you get to determine. My hope is that you get to determine the kind of support that you want that aligns with what you're seeking. And so first is really knowing what you're looking for, and that aligns with your issue, right? So if it is more aligned with trauma, you may want someone that's a bit more trauma informed. A lot of therapists have certain specialties, so you look for those with your specialty. So even if you're searching and you may type in depression, a bunch of therapists, will pop up depending on what certain, tool you're using to search for therapists, whether that's, Psychology Today or, Black Girls in Therapy, or right, like just the various tools that are out there. Kind of be very specific as you can to see if they are the ones that are trained within your issue.
Our next question, I think this is all still kind of following line. What's the most important quality a person should look for when searching for a mental health therapist?
So we know that it's very subjective. I'm just gonna speak for my opinion. That's gonna vary from person to person, obviously, but you're asking me the question. The best quality.
Let's magnify it. What are some important qualities to you?
I like that. I have to start with authenticity. I think society has a way of silencing our voices and encouraging folks, especially Black folks, to suffer in silence and to put on a mask to in order to kind of play the game, right, or survive. And so with my own personal journey, there's been a real digging of living in my truth and in my rawness, and bringing that to the therapy room every single day. And so that is a daily challenge for me. Not a challenge, but I would say it is a obligation for me, that in order to work with folks that pour out their life stories to me, that I have an obligation to show up as my true authentic self with them every day. Yeah. So that's number one for me, authenticity. Genuineness is always a beautiful thing because, I hear stories. Another one would be, as for a therapist, right? Mm-hmm. Having a non-judgmental approach or stance. I don't care what story you want to tell me, how absurd you may think it is, how dramatic you may think it is. I just want you to be able to feel comfortable enough to just be you and tell me your truth without feeling as if you're being judged, because who wants to be judged? Who wants to be judged while telling the truth? Like no one deserves that. And so I think it's very, 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 very important to have a non-judgmental stance. You may be able to support them and say, okay, that may not be the most healthiest thing to do. And you can still do that without being like, oh, shameful, bad. Does that make sense? So I just try to, stay clear of that. But also, I'm not in a place to judge. If I put it up to y'all maybe have a judgment about me, So I am not in a place to judge. So it's easier for me to just come from that stance because how dare I? Like I have no stance in that. So, okay. Sorry, I can get to talking, right? So non-judgmental, and then let me add another one. Aware. That they are aware of their own biases, implicit bias, their own, the ways in which their bias may show up. Yeah, that they are aware, and that's not interrupting the therapeutic rapport. And that's for all of us.
So we got honest, genuine, non-judgmental, and aware. Authentic and aware. Authentic was the first one, yes. And so, Dr. Anderson, this is great. I have one more question that I really kind of want you to address really quickly because we have a few minutes left in the show. But this question came in, and when we talked about it earlier, we were talking about it from the friend who's addressing someone saying, like, you need to go to therapy. But this seems to kind of flip it on the other side. If I need help and somebody's telling me, how do I let people know? How do I tell people that they do have or give them signals that they have permission to address my feelings?
Okay, reframe the question for me.
How do you tell people that they have permission to address your feelings? How do you let them know that it's okay, I guess, to kind of, how do you open up to kind of let people know, I'm struggling, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking for help, but I haven't sought help for myself. But I don't want to scare people off from telling me. I think that's where this question is going. How do I let people know it's okay to address my feelings or to address,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I understand. So a person wants to open up emotionally, right? But they're saying, like, how does someone else give me permission to open up?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a wall. There's a wall. How do I let that wall down?
That's a process. That's a process. If I can say anything around that, vulnerability. So vulnerability breeds connection. Yeah. If you think of a time that you cried in front of someone and they held those tears, and in that moment they did not judge you or shame you, but they welcomed those emotions, that's called vulnerability, right? If you think about that time, you think about how after that relationship either grew, you felt safer with them, you felt closer to them. Yeah. So vulnerability is a way to break the wall. But vulnerability is very hard to do if there's not a sense of safety in that relationship. So the person that you're wanting to kind of, be emotional with, or the person that's encouraging you to be emotional, they must understand that they have to create a sense of safety, and that may take time for that person to bring down that wall. But once it happens, it gets easier and easier to create that relationship. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it wasn't my question, but I hope
Okay.
whoever asked the question.
I hope I answered you all's question. But vulnerability.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Anderson, that's bringing us to the close of the show. And so, first of all, I want to thank everyone who's joined us. But before we close it out, Doc, do you want to just kind of give the audience something to kind of leave here with, some points, and just kind of bring it in? I know we're at the time, so just whatever you have quickly.
Let me start speaking because we're over because I can talk. All right. So first of all, thank you all for being here. I'm super honored. So what we talked about today is really the importance of mental health, right? We want to take into account our emotional, spiritual, psychological, and social well-being, right? Those can look in various ways, but we need to know when we are in need of help, and know where to go and who to ask for help, right? What I've created for everyone, whoever is interested, I know we talk a bit about peace and how, we want a more peaceful life. And so what I've created is a 7-day Chasing Peace Challenge, right? If you visit the chasingpeacechallenge.com, you will be able to sign up for this challenge. So this challenge is, I created 7 affirmations and activities that you can do for 7 days that will encourage you to chase after your tranquility, to chase after your inner awareness, and just to really dive into what peace looks like for you. So that is something for you all to have, to sign up. And once you sign up, the challenge starts immediately and you'll receive it for the next 7 days. So that's something that I wanted to give to you all personally. And then lastly, Ray, I want to say thank you just for being here and keeping the conversation going. And, you know, I would love to pick up next week and dive into anxiety and stress. So that's something else we have to look forward to for next Saturday.
Yes. Well, Dr. Anderson, I want to thank you for coming. And I also want to thank Boston Scientific and everyone who's watching at home on STEM City USA. Thank you. If you have not visited STEM City USA, or if you just jumped in and just kind of picked up on the show, explore. There's some amazing things that we're doing in our metaverse, STEM City USA. Just check it out, explore. There's something in every click. You're going to find something new. So be sure to join us. Thank you again to Boston Scientific for sponsoring, and we hope to see you next week, 11 a.m. here on STEM City USA, where Dr. Tiffany Anderson is going to be talking about anxiety and stress. And I know I got anxiety and stress, so I hope we can offer some tips and some information that can help you with that. And so, like I alluded to earlier, as we close out the show, I'm going to show you a preview of STEM City Chicago. This is just one of the next phases of STEM City USA that's soon to come. Keep your eyes out on it. I hope you enjoy. See you next week.
All aboard. Step up, ladies and gentlemen. Doors are closing. Good day, ma'am. Good day, sir. Thank you for boarding. Have your tickets ready. Next stop is downtown Chicago.
they call. Waiting for your words forever, they're unspoken. Promises are made forever, they're unbroken. No breath, no sight, eyes wide open but with no light. Everything about it seems so right. Darkness comes, but I can feel you through the rain. The fire's still burning while I'm waiting for the train. The train, the train, the train.
Step up, ma'am.
You can't wait 5 minutes.
I have to close the doors. Is there...
Just 5 minutes more, please.
I cannot wait 5 minutes, ma'am. I am sorry. I got a load full of people to get downtown.
You can't work with me at all.
I'm sorry.